As Ian presents, please hold your comments until the end. At the end of the presentation, you will have an opportunity to comment. Thank you.
All right, looks like we're all ready. So thank you all for coming. My name is Ian Brown. I'm going to be the lead engineer on this project, but I'll be getting much needed support from Gabriella, our new deputy commissioner, as well as Jim Michael, our new commissioner. So you're in good hands. We have a lot of minds on this project. So this is a project information meeting for the Shore Road Sidewalk project. This project information meeting will present the feasibility of the proposed sidewalk, as well as act as a public input session, which are the conditions required to release the remaining funds. So yeah, let's get right to it. I feel like I've talked about this a little bit in depth in the past, but so I'll be quick. Back in 2023, we completed a sidewalk project on Shore Road between the section of Sound Beach Avenue and Tomac Avenue. We believe this project was a success. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from it, so much so that we were approached by Shore Road residents living south of Sound Beach asking if we could do something similar between Sound Beach Avenue and Todd's Point. As is the standard for all sidewalk projects, we circulated a questionnaire to all the affected residents to gauge the appetite for such approval before committing to a sidewalk project like this one, and we were able to hit the threshold. The DPW at this point has made significant progress on the design of the sidewalk, and now a preliminary draft will be prepared, and that's something I'm going to be hitting very hard in these next couple slides. Throughout the majority of this presentation, I'll be trying to do my best to walk you through the design decisions, the conflicts we've run into, and the feasibility of the sidewalk itself. And while the original plan was to investigate a sidewalk all the way to Todd's Point, that scope has been revised to be limited to the section of Shore Road between Sound Beach Avenue and South Crossway, so right before that stone bridge. With our preliminary plans in hand, the next step, and the step we're on right now, is to contact homeowners that will be more heavily affected by the construction of a sidewalk. And this is for certain homeowners who have features within the right-of-way that will need to be relocated prior to construction of a sidewalk. So hedges, fences, stone walls, things like that. So first things first, I do want to say we believe that this project is feasible. Only one easement is expected, and the homeowners have been responsive thus far. We're currently in the process of scheduling a time to discuss the terms of said agreement. And based on the analysis of existing obstructions, easement acquisitions, and utility conflicts, we've determined that the northwest side of the road, so the side closest to the Greenwich Cove, is the most optimal for the construction of a sidewalk. For most properties, I do want to mention that mailboxes will be affected, but this will be at no cost to the homeowner, and we're more than happy to work with the homeowners themselves on where a sidewalk would be relocated and how it would be relocated. We went through this a lot on the section of Shore Road between Tomac Avenue and Sound Beach, so not something we're a stranger to at all. I also wanted to mention, it's not up here, but I wanted to make a note about sprinkler systems. So in the event that the project moves forward and there are sprinkler systems within the right-of-way that are owned by private properties and are not moved out of the way prior to the construction, these sprinkler systems will be ripped out. The town doesn't pay for relocation. It's the responsibility of the homeowners to move sprinkler systems prior to construction. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Construction is anticipated in the late summer to early fall. So now to the meat and potatoes of the presentation, like I mentioned earlier, I want to walk you through the design that we have put together for the construction of the sidewalk. I'll be going through each of the plan sheets one by one with an emphasis on features and design challenges. And I'd ask that you please hold your questions until the end of the presentation because we got a lot to cover. And I'm going to be starting at the South Crossway end. I will say we ran into a couple technical difficulties, so I had to print this out as a PDF rather than PowerPoint, so I don't have some of my animations that I wanted to get, but it'll be fine. We'll get through it. So the first is, like I said, at the end closest to South Crossway. If you can see at the top left corner of the page, that's where it extends into the stone bridge and where the scope of our project ends. I'll start with the arrow. So I wanted to talk a little bit about snow shelves. We aren't going to be putting them everywhere, or at least we haven't designed for them to be put everywhere, but we like to have snow shelves installed, and let me back up a little bit. Snow shelves are that little green strip along the roadway. It's just a small landscaped area that gives us room to put mailboxes, signs, and also acts as a shelf for the snow when a plow comes down. And as you can imagine, we don't want them piling snow onto the sidewalk. So these snow shelves act as a shelf for the snow, to hold the snow off of the sidewalk. And I also wanted to mention in the red box, so yesterday I had a nice productive conversation and a walk through the site with the tree warden, Gregory Kramer, and we went through the project holistically as they pertain to the health of trees. And one thing in this location specifically, we noticed that basically all of these trees in front of 207 Shore Road are dead and will be getting removed at the discretion of the tree warden. He just felt that they were a safety hazard, being that they are very dead. But there might be some living in there, but I was told that the majority of these will be coming out prior to the start of construction. On the next page, I wanted to highlight at the top left circle, there is a hedge here. So this would be a obstruction in the right-of-way that we want to work with homeowners to coordinate the best course of action to have this relocated. Because obviously it is within the town right-of-way, but usually maintained by the private properties. So we try to do our best to coordinate with the homeowners, get an agreement that works with everyone. But they will need to be moved should we move forward with this project.
If I can just add that all of these slides will be posted to the project webpage tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll post all of these online so you don't have to squint at my end. Take a.
What's the address of that hedge?
It's 207 Shore Road. And again, I think you came in a little late. I want to ask that we hold questions until the end. No problem at all. But just because we got a lot of ground to cover. So on that note, I'll keep.
You know what, Ian, these are very hard to see. So you might get some questions about where we are in the middle of your presentation.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to do a better job of explaining where exactly we are, some of the addresses on there. So right now we have 205 and 203 Shore Road. I also want to note in the smaller circle on the bottom right, that is a giant tree. It's a giant silver maple. It's beautiful and it's very healthy. It's a conversation I had at length with the tree warden. This is in front of 201 Shore Road. If you are driving towards the beach, you can look on the right. It is so big, in fact, that it alters the features of the earth around it. So it's something that we definitely want to pay special attention to. It's something that we want to keep alive. So we're going to do our best to work around it. And like I said, this is a conversation we had with our tree warden, so he's aware of everything we're doing with this project as well. This is at the intersection of North Crossway. The first thing I want to point out is on the left side of the screen. There is a unique situation here where the driveway actually comes out at an angle. It almost straddles the borderline between North Crossway and Shore Road. We want to clean up this intersection by making it a more traditional right angle intersection. This will require some redesign of the driveway at 201 Shore Road. So we'll need to acquire a right of entry. And what a right of entry is basically a form that allows the town to work on private property. It's not making any, we're not asking for an easement, we're not asking for access through it permanently. It's just a temporary allowance for us to work on the property. But we'll be working with 201 Shore Road, the homeowners there, hopefully more in the future. Moving on, I did want to note on the second arrow that there is some curb realignment here. We will need to pull the curb out approximately 3 feet, I believe, in order to avoid 2 large utility poles. At this location, there's a utility pole that sits at the corner or is at the corner, and it actually is a unique situation where there is a guy pole. Normally, you would see steel cables supporting the utility poles, but this is a situation where they actually have what looks like another utility pole supporting the utility pole. So it's a unique situation that we'll have to adjust the roadway to accommodate. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was utility poles in general. So it's hard to see right now, but in the circle, there are actually 2 utility poles there. I'm sure as residents in the Shore Road area, you've noticed that a lot of utility poles, it's not just one of them, it's oftentimes 2 of them. We're doing our best to work with the utility companies to have the double poles removed, so it's only a single pole, because in a lot of situations, the second pole is either just for support or still just holding some outdated, not outdated, but still just holding some of the cables and just need to be relocated before they can be fully removed. So we're trying to get the wheels turning on that to have the double poles removed, so it's just one pole as opposed to 2, and that makes us easier. That makes things easier for us when constructing a sidewalk, less obstructions to worry about. So moving on, this is in front of 191 Shore Road. The first thing I want to mention are the 2 circles with X's in them. We will need to remove 2 trees in front of 191 Shore Road. After conversations with the tree warden, these trees were actually infected with something I had never heard of. They called it scale. It's a insect infestation, and it's notoriously difficult to control. So they wanted to make sure that they got rid of those trees, and they will be replacing them following the completion of the project. Most likely in the same spots, just a couple feet back, probably. We will also, in the third circle, more towards the middle of the screen, there is a divider feature that needs to be removed. And for all of these in front of 191 Shore Road, we've met with Eileen Grasso, the owner of the property, and had some productive conversations. So we're hoping to have more in the future as we move along with this project. And something I'll get into a little bit further down the line, but we will need to, in the box, begin some curb realignment, meaning that the curb will need to come a little bit into the road in order to accommodate some of the obstructions that we have a little bit further down on the next slide. Give me 1 second, my mouth is getting dry. So in the arrow is the obstruction that I'm talking about. I met with the homeowner here, and we're doing our best to accommodate the features here. This is at 185 Shore Road. So at 185 Shore Road, there's a unique situation where there is a hedgerow as well as 3 trees that are within the right-of-way and in conflict with where a proposed sidewalk would be installed. This is also another unique situation where the home itself is very old and was built much closer to the road than you would see in many homes today. So it's a situation where we wanted to work with the homeowner to get their feedback on how they feel about the project, what would make them feel more at ease, and I think I had a productive conversation with the homeowner. The solution that we came up with was a curb adjustment that I mentioned on the previous page. So it'll start back here in front of 191 Shore Road and slowly adjust outward to give us enough room to slide a sidewalk in front of the 3 trees and the hedgerow at 185 Shore Road. And in order to accommodate this, we are hoping to expand the road on the other side to maintain the current width of the road. And I guess on that note, I do want to note that we're trying to maintain the existing edge of roadway as much as possible. We know that this is not just, walkers, this is drivers, this is bicyclists, so we don't want to narrow the road unnecessarily. We want to keep it, at the very least, as wide as it is today. So that's why in a lot of these situations where we are moving the curb out, we also are going to be looking at moving the curb in on the other side, as long as we have the right-of-way available to us. And in front of 183 Shore Road, the curb alignment ends, and that's where it meets with the existing edge of roadway. And that's where the new curb will match with the existing edge of roadway. This is just south of Nawthorne Road. Not too much to mention here. There are 2 trees that are actually not marked on the survey. They are 2 small trees, and in my conversations with the tree warden, I was told that these are young enough and healthy enough that they can survive being replanted just a couple feet back. So should the project move forward, we'll have to work closely with the Parks Department and the tree warden to ensure the health of these trees following relocation. And this is in front of 175 Shore Road. And this is just a drawing panned up at the intersection of Nawthorne Road with Shore Road. I wanted to kind of highlight this area because there is going to be some changes to the intersection at Nawthorne, and the curb will have to come out into Shore Road just a little bit. And the reason we're doing this is to avoid unnecessary easement acquisitions and conflicts with the existing fence, and just to make things easier on our end. But we ran these new turning movements through our traffic software to get a simulation of what passenger vehicles, trucks, fire trucks will look like when they make a turn like this one, and everything passed. This is something we'll definitely want to take a sharper look at as we move forward towards construction, but everything preliminarily tells us that it works. Moving on. This is at 165 Shore Road. So this is where our one and only easement acquisition is located, in the box at the corner of the property. So in order to accommodate a sidewalk, we will need to route the sidewalk through a small section of private property at the corner of 165 Shore Road, and this was done to avoid 2 utility poles that are 2 utility poles and a fire hydrant that are located directly at the intersection. And this is the intersection with Juanetta and Shore Road. So the idea is to route it behind the utility poles, but of course that puts us on the private property. This is a conversation we're hoping to have in the near future. I've already made contact with the homeowners at 165 Shore Road, so now we're just trying to nail down a date and a time to coordinate and talk about the easement acquisition, and an agreement that works for everyone. So this is right just south of Juanetta, at the corner of 14 Juanetta, and in this location, there's a large hedge here, and I'm sure it's hard to see. The line work is pretty light, but right where my arrow is in red, there's a large hedge here and limited right-of-way. Unfortunately, the hedge encroaches heavily onto town right-of-way, and in order to construct a sidewalk, there's no way around it. This will be a situation where we'll be hoping to coordinate heavily with the homeowner on possible solutions, possible relocations, anything we can do on our end to help the homeowner make it more digestible for them, I suppose. But we haven't made contact with the homeowner there, but we're hoping to in the near future. And onto the final page of the site plans. This is just before the intersection of Sound Beach Avenue. There are very few conflicts here, except for the two utility pole conflicts that I circled. We will be coordinating with the relevant utility companies and making sure that we have enough room to accommodate ADA guidelines to fit a ADA compliant sidewalk along this section of Shore Road. I also circled the roadway width. It's hard to see, I'm sure, but it says 22.5. We're doing our best to try to avoid curb realignments and roadway narrowing in areas where the road is already very narrow, and this is one of them. So this is just something we'll have to be very careful about as we move forward with designs. We don't want to make the roadway a more dangerous situation than it should already be. And another consideration we're heavily keeping in mind are crosswalks. We know this was something that was heavily requested of us. And of course, you didn't see them in the previous plans I just showed, but I just wanted to get through those plans to show that a sidewalk is feasible. And from here on, we can talk about things like crosswalks and other safety improvements that we might want to consider. So the first, and the way I approached these crosswalks, I looked at basically every single intersection and try to figure out what the best configuration for a crosswalk would look like, and those will be on the screen to my right. And the first is at North Crossway. So just allow me 1 second. This is at the intersection of North Crossway with Shore Road. In my opinion, it seems feasible enough, but it will depend on outcomes of the conversations we have with the homeowners at 201 Shore Road, which is located at the top left-hand corner of the screen. I also wanted to make a note that generally we promote, or we generally don't design for crosswalks like this one, just because we don't like to put crosswalks to ramps that lead to nothing. It's impossible to make it an ADA ramp compliant if it only leads to dirt, unfortunately. As you can see in the southern side on the 4 East Point Lane side. But it is something we consider if there is a strong appetite for it. We just do want to make a point of it that these aren't ADA compliant. They are helpful for safety and visibility purposes, but won't be helpful if you have ADA or disability requirements.
And is the crosswalk, I can't say, is it going across Shore Road or is it going
Right.
connecting this
So
sidewalk?
it's going across Shore Road. It'll be from North Crossway at the top left-hand corner of the intersection. Down here, I'll point it out. So right here into this ramp here. And this is the ramp I was talking about. It's not technically ADA compliant because it doesn't lead to anything. But it does help with things like visibility and accessibility.
Anywhere the proposed sidewalk will traverse a side road, there will be a crosswalk there.
Right, and that wasn't translated onto the plans yet, but yes, that is the idea. The next one I wanted to talk about was at the intersection of Shoreham Club Road and Shore Road, and I'll point it out again so you can see it. It's this piece right here to across right in front. This is actually the town pump station. I just took a look at this one for feasibility because it's at another intersection. Not much to say here, really. It seems feasible, and we have the luxury of being in front of the pump station, the town-owned pump station. But we will need to coordinate with the homeowner at 4 Shoreham Club Road because, and I'll point it out, there's a driveway right here, and we don't want to introduce any sightline visibility issues that aren't there currently. But it does seem constructible, but we'll need to put a little bit more thought into sightline concerns for this one. Moving on, we have the intersection of Nawthorne Road and Shore Road. Unfortunately, in this situation, we're limited by, and let me back up, this is right in front of 178 Shore Road. There's a large hedge there. I'm sure you are all aware of that one. It kind of limits the presence of the hedge limits the available right-of-way that we have for a crosswalk or a pedestrian ramp here, as well as some unique property lines that run very close to the edge of the road. So we're limited on that front. I was able to sneak one in more towards the bottom of Nawthorne, right across here. But it wouldn't be my first choice, I suppose.
It's like a suicide.
Yeah. So moving on. And I know these two were the most requested, I believe, of the crosswalks that I have touched upon thus far. And this is at the intersection of Rocky Point Road as well as the intersection with Meadowbank Road. These were specifically requested, but I do want to make note of some of the challenges we're running into with these ones. I understand that Rocky Point has a lot of pedestrian traffic because the Rocky Point Club is down the road, and a lot of people would like to walk down there, and a lot of people already do walk down there. But I do want to make note of the 2 red lines. Those are the existing property lines, and as you can see, I'll point it out. Property line is in red, and the edge of the road is actually this light gray line right here. So we don't have much room to work. And if we were to put in a crosswalk at Meadowbank, which I know there is another big push for that one because I believe there is a bus stop there, a school bus stop. But it does encroach upon private property, so we'll need an easement agreement with the homeowner. Not something we can't do, but it is a conflict that we will need to approach. And that should about do it. I hope that wasn't too dry for you guys, but I mostly wanted to have this for the question and answer portion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for your presentation and all your hard work on the design of the draft. I would like to also make a note that we have a request into the BET right now, and there's a public hearing on Thursday for this town project. The funding for the construction of this project is not available until this funding is approved. So if all goes well, then as Ian mentioned, construction would be anticipated late summer, early fall. So now we will start our public comment session. So what we will do is if you would like to comment, please raise your hands and I will hand you a microphone so that you can have an opportunity to make a comment or ask a question.
Hi, I'm Eileen Grasso. I live at 191 Shore Road. And I think the sidewalk, thank you very much, by the way, Ian, because you've done a really great job. And we've had a couple of conversations and emails, so I think you've been really responsive to all the neighbors, and I appreciate that. I think this sidewalk is a great idea for the safety of pedestrians, and there's so much pedestrian traffic going down to the beach from Sound Beach Avenue, so I think it's a wonderful idea. But the objective here is safety. And in addition to pedestrian traffic, there is a ton of bicycle traffic. And there are now these charming little bicycle vehicles that have to be on the road, that have little buckets in the front where people put a couple of kids, and that just adds to the chaos on the streets down there. And I walked the road, and I know that you're trying to maintain the width of the road, but I think in a lot of places it's going to be really difficult because there are phone poles on the opposing side of the street that are within, inches of the roadway. And so to be able to accommodate the sidewalk on one side and then take from the other, I think is going to be very challenging. And I don't see any reference as you go down Shore Road. You haven't circled anything on the other side of the street. And I think it's really important that you look at all of that because you would really have to relocate phone poles in order to accommodate keeping the width of the road safe. And in particular, that intersection of Nawthorne and Shore Road, which everyone in town knows is like one of the most dangerous sections of roadway. It's astonishing to me how there haven't been more, pedestrian car incidents. And I just feel as if we're going to spend the money to make this safer for pedestrians, it needs to accommodate the safety of bicycles and these other roadway vehicles, strollers that people wind up walking on the road with. And I think it has to be, a more comprehensive plan that maybe you need to use eminent domain to make that roadway wider, particularly there.
Thank you, Eileen. Those are all very salient points, and definitely something we'll be keeping in mind as we move forward. Eminent domain is something we try to avoid as much as possible because it is a long, litigious, arduous process, but we will use all of the available resources and tools that we have in order to make the roadway safe. And obviously, all of your input today is very important on that front. 'Cause it's not just me working on these plans, it's also hopefully all of you as well. But yes, as I mentioned earlier, we will try to do our best to maintain the existing roadway width. And that's why I highlighted Nawthorne as a very, something I want to maybe take a little deeper dive into. Like I said, I ran all the traffic turning movements in our simulation software, but in a situation like this, and something we've done at Greenwich Avenue actually is in-person traffic movement studies where we mark out in the roadway where exactly modifications will be made, and then have we would mark it out and block it off with either bollards or cones, basically to simulate the new curb line and watch traffic pass through the intersection prior to construction. So perhaps that's a method that we can use in this intersection to determine if the changes we're proposing are more viable in a real life sense, because we don't want to rely on the turning movement software all the time. But yes, I'll definitely make a note of that. And
One down on a Saturday morning.
yeah. We'll do our best to promote the safety of the project as we're making it through design.
Hi, I'm Vin DeMarco. I'm co-chair of the Active Transportation Task Force along with Bob D'Angelo here. And we've obviously watched this through the first SOS. And, we've been advocating for all the users, safety for all users on roads in Greenwich. I have a few questions. First of all, I assume this is a 5-foot wide sidewalk per town spec. And is it, but I can't tell, and I'm not sure that it was mentioned whether it's a concrete sidewalk or whether it would be an asphalt. And then the other question would be granite curb or some other softer curving. And then in general, my question is about the guidelines or the manual that you're following, guidelines that you're following for different treatments on a specific type of a road. I noticed that the speed limit is 25 miles an hour, I believe, all the way along there. Everybody can verify that. And I was doing a little research on beach roads. In other words, a road that is not a through road. It's one that carries people from one point to another. It's a road, not a street necessarily, and takes you from one place to another. And I think there's maybe a concern with some homeowners that the treatment should be context sensitive. It's not like the other side of Shore Road, where that's actually, carries you from one point to the other, but it's a little bit different situation. It seems that the beach road, Shore Road South, should be considered differently, and that the speeds perhaps could be lowered on that road. Maybe we can go to 20 miles an hour, and then consider other possible treatments. And the research that I'm referring to is it is part of the federal highway, but it's a highway manual, but it's actually for rural roads. And there's numerous treatments, including sidewalks, that could be considered in this situation that might make it safer for all users.
Yes, so it's going to be a granite curb. When we do sidewalk projects like this one, our town standard moving forward, and for the past several years now, has been all granite curb. We like to think that it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. It's also a little bit more sturdy than your standard concrete curb. I know to the ire of some drivers, it's a little bit too sturdy, but we like to think that the positives outweigh the negatives. So it will be a granite curb. It is going to be a 5-foot wide sidewalk unless there are certain conflicts that will require us to shrink the curb down. The current PROWAG, that's Public Right-of-Way Accessibility Guidelines, allows us to shrink down to a 4-foot wide sidewalk, which we have done in a couple spots on Shore Road, but the town standard is 5 feet, and we like to keep 5 feet. And in fact, you can't actually do a 4-foot wide sidewalk anymore. You can only do it for certain lengths before it has to be expanded to a 5-foot wide sidewalk. So it'll be 5 feet wide for the majority, unless there is a specific conflict that prevents us from doing so. The sidewalks will also be asphalt, except for at pedestrian ramps. And that's just following with our standard detail through town. We like to think that the asphalt, or we know that the asphalt is, one, a little bit cheaper, and in situations like this one where there are a lot of street trees, they are a little bit more accommodating to root systems, and are a little bit more accessible because there are some concerns when you have concrete sidewalks. They can do what's called flagging. So if you look at a concrete sidewalk, they're usually built in small square sections, and these can actually lift and create unsafe conditions for walkers, as opposed to asphalt sidewalks, which can be a little bit more accommodating to outside forces that are growing under or operating outside of the nearby the sidewalk. I also believe there was a question about speed, lowering the speed. That I don't have an exact answer for you. I can look into having the speed lowered, but obviously, a sign isn't going to force anyone to slow down, unfortunately, as much as I would love them to. It comes down to enforcement very much. And that is a conversation that we can have with the police department, but nothing we can, force anyone. We can't force anyone to drive 20 miles per hour, but as much as we would like to. Gabriella?
Yes, I can add on that. So speed limits are only allowed to be reduced by OSTA, which is the Office of Traffic Safety at the Connecticut DOT. 25 miles per hour is typically the minimum that they will allow on local roads, and it's based on the 85th percentile of the existing speed. So it's very difficult to get approved for anything less than 25, but it's something that we can ask the question and look into.
And I believe the last thing you mentioned was beach treatment. I honestly don't have much experience with that, so if you have any documentation that you would like to share with us, I know you work a lot with Michael. You can either send it to Michael Kiselak, or I can give you my business card and you can send that information to me, and I'd be happy to pour over it a little bit in more detail.
Yeah, I'm Carol Ducray, and I live on the Driftway. And I almost got hit tonight coming out of my driveway. The problem I've had all these years, whether it's the Driftway, the Shore Road, we are not enforcing the speed limit. And I think that there has to be something done. I mean, I can't understand why tickets are not being given. And as I said, a policeman could be there even an hour a week. But if he gives tickets, I feel that the word spreads around. You better not speed on Shore Road, you better not speed. There's other areas of town too, but we're just happy to be talking about this area. It might slow the traffic down if they get speeding tickets. And I've never seen a policeman, I've lived in my house almost 40 years, anywhere near the Driftway, which is 15 miles an hour, and I've never seen anyone give a ticket, and I don't know why. I think that has to be brought up by all the neighbors that live in the area, not just me. Thank you.
Understood, and we hear you. This is a complaint that we get, not only in Old Greenwich, but all around town. And at the DPW, there's only so much we can do. I like to say you can't engineer compliance. You can do your best to try to get people to slow down, but at the end of the day, people are going to drive the way they're going to drive. And enforcement is a conversation that we'll need to have with the police department. And I'm sure you've reached out to the police department, or other neighbors have as well. It's a hot button topic for sure.
Morgan Evans, I live at 143 Shore Road, and I just have two questions, if I could just ask them sequentially. First is regarding potential crosswalks at Meadowbank and Rocky Point. You said that that large bumper strip on the outside of 3 Meadowbank. Is it your understanding, or does that property belong to 3 Meadowbank?
Yes, so that's all private property, unfortunately, so it kind of limits how much room we have to put in a crosswalk. And
Sorry, I know it's private, but but you're saying it's definitely 3 Meadowbank and not Rocky Point Club?
I believe it's 3 Meadowbank. I can talk to our surveyor to figure out the exact owner, but I believe it's 3 Meadowbank, at least from my understanding.
Okay, you might want to look into that, because my understanding, or I know that Rocky Point owns 8 feet on either side of Rocky Point Road, almost the entire way up, and that wraps around onto Shore Road. But that's my informal understanding.
Could be, yeah.
I know it's on Rocky Point, so definitely check that out.
I'll
And
reach out to
I think the Rocky Point Club might be worth talking to. I think that they'd be open to crosswalks at that location.
If that's the case, then yeah, that would make things a lot easier for us.
Yeah, there's a reason why that wall is not further out towards the road. That person's
Right.
yard would be a lot bigger. And second is just regarding moving the telephone or power telephone poles, especially at the narrow point of Shore where it connects with Sound Beach. I know that I'd be thrilled to see a lot of those double poles be brought down to one, but when you say move a pole, what does that mean? Putting it on the other side of the street, or I don't really understand what that means.
when we move a pole, it's a conversation that we need to have with the utility companies. It's not just Eversource. There are, depending on the pole, very many different utility companies that are involved. You have Verizon, you have Altis, you have, in some situations, CNG, the gas company. Not over here, but I've seen it in the past. So it's a process that we need to start with whoever owns the pole first. In the past, I think it's been Verizon. I think Eversource might own some poles as well. Gabriella, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
So I've been having conversations with the emergency management director, Joe Lasella, who has been assisting several neighborhoods throughout town to eliminate the double poles. Oftentimes, there are new poles put in, and you have one utility that has carried over their lines, and they're waiting for the other utilities to move their lines over in order for the old pole to be removed. So we've started those conversations to make sure that all those overhead wires are moved from the old pole to the new pole so that the old pole can be cut down.
And this section of town, Frontier owns most of the poles. So Frontier is the owner of the poles in this section. But also just kind of to hit on your question, I think that what we look at doing is either, is there available space to move it maybe a couple feet back to accommodate both the sidewalk but still keep it within the town's right-of-way? Or how could it be relocated one direction or the other to accommodate that? So generally, it's a significant concern to try and move it from one side of the street to the other because that would require multiple poles and additional line work. And so that would, generally would take a number of, to be blatantly honest, a number of years to move something of that nature. Yeah, so, yeah. Yeah, so we're taking a look at a couple of these spots. We are able to still accommodate a sidewalk if it's just a single pole location with less than the 5-foot width. It's not ideal, and it was something that we like to avoid as much as possible. But if we can place the sidewalk and just have a single spot where that you have to kind of walk around, as bad as it sounds, you have to kind of walk around the pole, but still is on a paved pathway. That's what we sometimes will try to do to accommodate it, and not kill an entire project for one or two poles the entire length of the site. So.
At the Arnold Carp, I live on Westway, on the corner of Northon, where you're thinking about reducing the width of the road. Have you thought about like a pavement calming? Because that's everybody drives pretty quickly. If you're actually putting the sidewalk into what is now the roadway, I think that's going to be an obstacle that you should deal with in pavement. I don't know if it's grooved, a different color, something that is going to slow the traffic down. Because if you stand there, doesn't matter if it's bus time or any time during the day, you have people who are sort of speeding up the road from both sides. And if we're kicking the sidewalk out, making that narrow sort of reminds me of the old kids' cars where there was like the suicide where they actually came too close together. So maybe just be something to consider at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a number of different tools, I guess you could call it, in our toolbox. Grooved pavement is not one that we have used much around town, but it's definitely something we can look into in a unique situation like this one. I know I personally had some concerns about the roadway here, which is why I was paying closer attention to it with turning movements and things like that. But perhaps there's some things we can do, like shrinking the sidewalk to be, I believe it's 5 feet in this location. Maybe we can go down to 4 feet. Because it's not exactly a super long section of sidewalk, so I think the ProAg guidelines would accommodate that. But like I said, there are a lot of tools we can take a look at, a lot of tools we can use to accommodate traffic calming, but given the roadway that we're dealing with, very old with a lot of obstructions, we're kind of limited. But the grooves and roadway treatment could be a good opportunity to look at.
Bob D'Angelo, I'm on the Transportation Task Force with Vin. Basically, just three things. I know that the town likes the granite curb, but I really, really think when you look at it from a pedestrian or a bicycle, it's an extremely dangerous curb just because it's got that sharp edge. So because of the squeezing here, and I think increased people that are going to use this to the beach, it's going to be really, really important to see if you can put I think there's a way to cut a bevel to take some sharpness off that curb. I would highly ask that you really consider making that a bevel cut just to give somebody a chance when they get squeezed off the road, say on a bicycle or running or whatever, and fall on that, they're going to break a rib or fracture a skull or worse. So please, on the bevel, that's really needed. And then secondly, it might have been on there, but I couldn't read it. Generally, what are the widths of your lanes, basically? Are you going down? I know Jim likes to try to stay at a minimum of 10.5, basically 10.5 feet. Are you squeezing, any less than that? Or, and the reason I ask that is there any plan at all, if you have any room, to put a white stripe shoulder? It's not a protected lane, but it gives some awareness to a car driver that he could expect that little slice out there is really for not a car, basically. Is there a plan for a shoulder stripe where it's possible?
Not at the moment, but I can look into something like that. Normally, or at least with this design, like I said, I've been trying to keep the roadway width matching existing as much as possible. But even in areas where we have needed to shrink the roadway down, like even at Northorn here, it's hard to see. Maybe I can actually zoom in, but I included the roadway width here at our most narrow part. It's still 24 feet, 24.8 feet. So you can imagine it would be about 11 and a half foot lanes with a 1 foot double yellow in the middle. So
Right.
It's wider than our standard, but we know this situation is unique in that it's on a bend and it's a lot of traffic, and we've gotten complaints about this corner as well. We wanted to make sure we have a little bit extra space as well. But yeah, roadway width is definitely something we want to pay as much attention to, and I believe throughout the entirety of our project, we will have at least 10.5
Right.
foot lanes.
Well, I don't know the feasibility of intermittent, shoulder striping, but if you can at all, it's really, it's a visual, gives awareness. If you can get a white shoulder stripe in there, at least in some portion of it, that would really help, the runners and the cyclists that are on the road. And then the last thing, just to echo, it's not a repeat, but the speed thing is just really, really important. It's extremely dangerous. I don't know if GPD or the town has data from, just monitoring speed, what the average speed on a general day or, seasonally is. But just a real short story. 2 months ago, I went to Centerport, Long Island, to a birthday party, and I got there real early because I wanted to go explore a beach. I think the name of the beach was Nolan Beach, and I went to the yacht club there, got there early, checked in, I asked the bartender to the beach, and he warned me. He said, do not drive a mile above the speed limit. They're just fanatical about speed there. So they have a culture of speed there, and it was 25 miles an hour, and I was at, 22 miles an hour. But the thing that was incredible was everybody on the road was just driving real slow. So they established a culture of speed there. And I think what's going to happen here when we get this project done, I think I know you're DPW, you're not GPD, and you're not the selectman, but there's going to have to be a real, I think, press to put a cop car out there. And I saw the cop car. He's waiting right there. Nobody's speeding. And it's a similar thing. It's a one-way out to the beach and back. It's not a through area, so it's just like Todd's Point, basically. It's going to have to happen here.
Yeah, something we're working on with our latest communication specialist is definitely outreach. Like you said, I'm not the police, so I can't exactly enforce this stuff, but we do try to make all of the changes that we make public knowledge as best as we can, as well as try to get, just useful information out there as much as we can. So, remind people to drive slow, remind people not to litter, remind people to, be considerate on the road. It's a big thing. And on your point with the beveled curb, that's a conversation I will have with Highway. I believe they've done that around town, so I think that's feasible. I'll just have to talk to them about it and make sure they're comfortable with it in a situation like this one.
I also want to just thank you. These are great descriptions, and it's really great to see what it could look like. I live at 203 Shore Road, and it's just before the Driftway. My neighbor and I both have a question. My neighbor is a part-time neighbor. She goes south for the winter, and she has a gravel driveway, so she doesn't have her driveway plowed. And we had heard a rumor that we are responsible for clearing the sidewalks, and in her case, she's absent for many of the months when your sidewalk would need to be cleared. What we had heard was that we are responsible for clearing the sidewalks, the homeowner is, and if there is an accident on the sidewalk because we haven't cleared it properly, that homeowner is liable. And I just wanted to ask you if that was a rumor or if that's true in fact.
So that is true. The town ordinances state that should a sidewalk be installed outside of your property, you become liable for the clearing of snow as well as any other obstruction like leaves or anything like that. The homeowner is the sole person responsible for having that cleared. I know there's a lot of services that can have that done, but the town does not have any responsibility for the clearing of the sidewalks. They're more for the maintenance and just making sure that they are still in good shape. But snow and leaf removal falls upon the responsibility of the homeowner. And should a slip and fall happen, and it's the responsibility of the and the snow was not shoveled, then the liability falls to the homeowner.
And that is the ordinance for all existing sidewalks in town.
Okay, just a couple of quick things about the sidewalk ordinance that we're hoping that we're going to be able to propose a change to that ordinance because it's a joke. It was instituted in 1958, and the fine remains $25 if you're found not to do what you're supposed to do to clear your sidewalk. Anyway, but a larger conversation really needs to happen around that ordinance. Perhaps even the town would take on the responsibility, being that it's a pretty short road and goes to a beach that's a recreational facility. Perhaps something could be done where Parks and Rec can handle that sidewalk like they do others. Anyway, the other question I have is, what is the actual length of the project of that stretch of Shore Road?
I believe it's just over a mile, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the exact number.
A number of years ago, we had a pretty good crowd in here talking about undergrounding wires. And I'm curious whether or not that's been considered for Shore Road.
Do you want to take this one?
Sure. Unfortunately, all the wires overhead and all the poles are privately owned. The town does not own or we're not responsible for the operation and maintenance of those wires. In order to take those wires and put them underground would be a huge undertaking and very expensive, especially in an area that is very often flooded. To have all those wires underground and prone to water damage. It's not something that the utilities would entertain.
I know that portion of shore, often, there are portions that often have issues with flooding. Would this help resolve some of those issues?
So this is a question that comes up a lot. Obviously, in this area of town, you're very close to the water. The water level is very close to the ground level. So a lot of areas flood in this neighborhood. We are aware of this, and this is something that our drainage department and our drainage guys are keenly aware of and try to work with as quickly as possible. But as far as this project, we don't have any real drainage improvements proposed. We like to think that the installation of curbs will allow for rainwater, stormwater to have a place to go, follow along the gutter slope, which is the basically the area of the curb adjacent to the curb along the roadway. It gives it a place to, it basically guides the rain where it needs to go. We'll be taking a look at the grading of the roadway when we make these installations to ensure that the water always has a place to go. We don't want to create any situations where ponding is rampant because we know that is already an issue in all over Old Greenwich. So we don't have any strict drainage improvements proposed, but there are some soft improvements that we're making with the curb, and I believe we might be entertaining the idea of reinstalling or updating some of the catch basins at North Crossway, but I'll need to look a little bit further into that because I don't have all the details right now.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that I just would ask you to make the lanes for the cars as narrow as you can legally, because I don't understand, you're putting sidewalks on because there's a lot of people that walk and use this road that are not in cars. So it just seems to me, and I'm not an engineer at all, but if the narrower you make it for the cars, it just is gonna slow them down. And it just gives that much more breathing room. They're going to a beach, and the speed limit at the beach is what, 10 or 15? It's not like they're going to an interstate. And again, but just this, kids, especially this section, I know the Tomac Road, that section has a lot of use on it, but people pour in from coming from Old Greenwich downtown or whatever you call it to head, so you've got much more volume of traffic. So again, you're going to all this expense and trouble to make it safer for people, so make it so the cars go slower. Just narrow it even that much more and put that white line to remind them, stay in your lane and go the speed that allows you to do that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No, we understand that definitely. The narrowing of the roadway is a tried and tested method of traffic calming. We know that for sure. If you narrow the roadway, it makes drivers more conscious of where they are. They're trying to protect their vehicle. They don't want to hit the curb, especially not in Greenwich. So they will unconsciously slow down. That's true. But I do want to say that we need to create the roadway for all users. This includes bicyclists as well. We don't want to narrow the roadway to a point where the bicyclists themselves are unsafe on the road. Of course, there are other things we can think about on that front.
I wasn't specifically meaning the road, like curb to curb be narrower. I meant the lane markings be narrower for the car, and then have the buffer on the sides for the bikes.
Okay, thank
Understood.
you.
On that front, we can take a deeper dive into the roadway edge lines, the shoulder markings, because I know at the Sound Beach ends, there actually are some roadway edge lines, shoulder lines that weren't extended throughout the entirety of of Shore Road. I know in a lot of situations, or in some situations for a local road, which is what Shore Road is classified as, we don't like to put on too many roadway markings because we don't want to make it feel like we want to make it feel more rural and more local, as opposed to adding markings that can make it feel more commercial and more high speed, I suppose. But that's definitely a conversation we can have with our highway department and see how they feel about the installation of roadway edge lines, because we can hold a 10.5-foot lane. We can hold a 10.5-foot lane and keep the existing roadway width, but I don't have an answer right now on whether or not that's going to be included in the project.
Oh, it's just me? No. All right, I'll just say, I just want to answer this girl that I live where we don't have we're on the Driftway, it's not even wide enough to be an official, whatever the word is, I'm not an engineer, you know what I'm saying? It's not wide enough to be an official road for 2 cars. Do you think that stops people from speeding? No way. We need to give tickets. I'm sorry, I was on Parking and Traffic Committee for 10 years, and I used to say that all the time. And I am sorry, but that's the only thing to me that can work, is to give tickets. And I think all of us in this room spread the word. We should, I don't know who we go to, but I'm saying how they're allowed to speed the way they do. And as I said, I live right there, and almost tonight I got hit. A car with, he was, I don't mean, it's 15, so you go 25. That's okay with me. But it's when they hit 40, it's scary. And there's a lot of them that do that.
Okay, thank you.
What is the estimated time frame to complete the construction?
So our start date is potentially late summer, early fall. We're hoping to start then. We'll work through the late fall months and probably pick it back up when the weather warms up in the spring. So I don't have an exact timeline for you, but we'd be hoping to get it done in the summer of next year, I believe. Gabriella, feel free to
With the
jump in.
restoration,
With the
which means like grass seeding and so on, but the hard construction would be during the fall and the spring.
And I hate to belabor this point. I know we talked about some other things, which I know you have taken note of, which is, for example, when plows come down the road, they're going to be plowing all this stuff onto our sidewalks. So if we get out there early enough and clear our sidewalks, and then 15 minutes later a plow comes down, we're dealing with that. And I've got 200 feet of sidewalk that now we have to take care of.
I think they say wait after the blizzard is done. There's like 18 hours.
Yeah, and hope nobody falls in the meantime, because then you're liable. Yeah, you didn't. Yeah, well, anyway, everybody's going down to the beach when it snows too. And this intersection at Norththorne, which is, to me, it's terrifying. And when I see your overhead, this project is making this so dramatically worse. Once you blew that up, I could see that hedge, and I think everybody in the neighborhood has talked about the hedge and the fact that that property owner is allowed to put a hedge on such a dangerous curve that blocks your sight line. So when you come around that corner and there's somebody running, because you're supposed to run against traffic, you don't see them until you're right on top of them. Is there anything that you can do, or one of the departments that you're connected to have that hedge either cut back, and they don't take very good care of it. It's often hanging over the roadway. That would probably help a lot if that hedge weren't on a blind curve like that. I don't know how they allowed that to happen in the first place, but making the roadway even more narrow and more dangerous at that intersection, having that enormous hedge that I can see now is over the property line. Why can't we, you're not taking it away from them, but why can't that hedge be moved back 10 feet and give you some room to see?
That issue of the hedges that impede your line of sight has come up many times in many places. Perhaps, I don't know whether it's DPW, but perhaps it's a police department, because I know that the homeowner can be required to do something about that, because it is a line of sight issue and it's dangerous. But I'm not sure who would be responsible. But I know it can be done.
Yes, DPW has sent letters to many people in the past regarding site distance issues, and that is something that we are looking at as part of this project, not just at this location, but along the entire route of this proposed sidewalk, so that we ensure that all the site distance is met for all the cross streets coming out and for those within the right-of-way.
And as far as how it got there, I think it's very old. It's a very old hedge, and it's been there forever. And unfortunately, a lot of times in town, that just happens. It's a very old town. But as far as contacting the homeowner, if it's on private property, there's very little we can do, unless it becomes a sightline issue, in which case.
100% it's a sightline.
It weaves in and out. There is a large portion that is on the
Yeah.
town right-of-way, and some of it is private.
We've spoken to the homeowner before, not me personally, but I know our highway department has had them trim it back, and I believe has been trimmed in the somewhat recent past, but I don't know the exact dialogue behind that.
It's a privet hedge, which most of us have on Shore Road. It has to be trimmed 2 or 3 times a year. It's expensive, it's a nuisance, but you have to do it. And they just don't pay any attention to it. It's grown enormously, and it's grown over the property line. I mean, it's really a dangerous thing.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Does anyone else have comments? Okay, snow removal?
Snow removal?
What is it, this time, you have like 18 hours after?
Yes, I believe it's 18 hours after the storm, or it might even be longer than that. You have, I don't have the notes with me right now, so I don't know the exact time frame, unfortunately, but I've circulated in the past, you have a certain amount of time, it's between 18 hours and 48 hours, maybe, to remove no, it's got to be 18 hours. After the storm ends, to shovel the snow off of the sidewalk in front of your driveway. And I know Jim has, and Eileen, on your point, you were concerned about plowing onto the sidewalks. Jim has explained to me in the past that the way the plow drivers operate is they try to be as conscientious of the certain conflicts that they have with plowing. So they try to plow in a situation where there's a sidewalk on one end, they try to plow to the other side, would be the idea. Obviously, it's not always gonna end up like that, but the plow drivers do their best to accommodate. And this is a conversation we can have with them, especially once the project really gets going. But yeah, there is the rule is, I believe, 18 hours after a storm, you need to shovel.
Well, there's a second dimension to that is, I'll take the $25 fine all day long. What I worry about is if you've got 200 feet of sidewalk now that you have to take care of, and maybe you wait 18 hours for the plowing to be done, and then somebody falls on it, that you better have a big umbrella policy, because then that's your problem.
Well, also, every landscaper in town is looking to do something in the winter. So, they're ready and available. The high school kids want to make some money. I mean, no one's expecting whoever's homeowner to actually be, I know.
Okay.
There are a lot of services for
Thank
shoveling.
you.
Some kids, because they need to have a certain amount of service hours in high school.
Okay. There's another meeting in this room at 7:30, so I'm sorry. I want to thank you all for coming. If
Picking
you
you
have
out,
any
you can't
additional
stay here.
questions or comments or would like to provide any input, please email Ian. His email address is on the project webpage.
Right.
And we would welcome any feedback or input that anyone might have, whether you're watching on TV or anything in the future. The slides will be posted on the project webpage. And it's on the Town of Greenwich webpage. If you go to DPW Projects, Shore Road, it will be listed as a PDF at the bottom of the page. Thank you so much.
This presentation will be posted, so you'll have a better view of all the plans, hopefully.